Hi everyone. Thanks for having me today at your virtual festival. I hope you're having an amazing day with all these great activities that I've seen you're doing. I'm Lauren Davies. I'm an author. I'm an author of 6 books, some novels, and my first children's book that came out recently that I'll talk to you about. And I'm also a screenwriter, so I work in film. And I've written some feature documentaries, and most recently I worked on a Disney film as a surfing coordinator because I'm also a surfer. I worked on the film Artemis Fowl that some of you may have seen during lockdown, as it was released during lockdown. So yeah, I'm a surfer and I'm also an environmentalist, and through that I've become a trustee of the charity Surfers Against Sewage. Surfers Against Sewage was started in the 90s by a group of surfers, one of whom is my children's book publisher. And it began really looking at sewage in our rivers and in our seas. But since then, the scope of Surfers Against Sewage has really widened. And now they have an all-party parliamentary group. So they work at governmental level really to promote and provoke change at policy level, to protect our planet, protect our oceans and marine environment and our environment in general. So Surfers Against Sewage was very influential in the plastic bag charge that came in a few years ago, and now they're really pushing for a plastic bottle deposit return scheme. So we would take our plastic bottles back, like used to happen back in the day. People would take glass bottles back and then get a certain amount of money for them. So it encouraged people to recycle, really. So that's what they're working on now, among many other campaigns. And I'm rather passionate about plastic pollution because I live on the beach and I'm a surfer and I kind of see its impact. And so a couple of years ago I began to write this book, Little Turtle Turns the Tide, that I'm reading to the brownies and rainbows at your amazing virtual festival. And this book was inspired by my little boy Bo, who was on the beach with me one day and started initiating a beach clean because he could see there were too many plastics around. And he said, well, this isn't good for the creatures. This is going to kill the creatures or damage them and damage their homes. So he really inspired me. And so this book was published at the end of 2019 and has just launched in America and in Australia. And it's really just spreading the message through the little turtle and his friends that if we all work together, we can really make a difference. And that this isn't an insurmountable problem if we all make some changes. So in the story, the little turtle he hatches from his shell. It's his first day in the world. And then he travels across the beach and he meets his little sea creature friends. And then he discovers plastic pollution. So you see, he discovers objects like this, and he's trying to work out why the environment isn't quite as he expected. So you see my very talented friend Nico has painted a pretty cool pink shark there, and but swimming through plastic bags. So the little turtle discovers this problem, but then he decides he wants to do something about it. And so on this page, the turtle says, action stations, come on, we have to do something about this. And he encourages his sea creature friends to join together to start spreading the message of how we can save our planet and clean up our planet. So his friends go out with him, and then they gather the children together, and the voice becomes louder and louder. And really, this is what it's all about. It's about working in collaboration, all of us, because it's our joint responsibility to turn this tide of plastic pollution. And so really in the book, we're doing what you guys do all the time, promoting that teamwork and collaboration. And we learn about different plastics along the way. And one of those, I will show you, is mermaids' tears. I talk about mermaids' tears in the book. These are mermaids' tears. These are little plastic nurdles, they're also called. And you may see these if you happen to be on a beach one day. Try and scan the sand It's particularly apparent in beaches in areas such as Cornwall. You see a lot of these in the sand. And these are kind of the offcuts, I suppose you'd say, from plastic production. These are tiny bits of plastic that are left over, and they find themselves in the environment, and then they enter the food chain. You know, these can look like fish food to a lot of creatures. So that's particularly bad if that's entering the food chain. So we're talking about these sort of plastics and single-use plastics. So I'm not saying all plastics are bad. You know, we must realise that plastic is an incredible material and it's a very useful material. So we're differentiating between plastics that will be used for a long time and make amazing things, and single-use plastics. I'm sure you'll have heard that term before, single-use plastics. So single-use plastics, things like, you know, this plastic bag that's floating around in the ocean in the book, and plastic straw and cotton buds and plastic bottles, and these can stay in our environment for a very long time. And actually, plastic never really goes away. It just gets broken down and down and down until it becomes what we call microplastics. So just smaller and smaller pieces of plastic. And these are, I'm sure you've seen the studies of plastics being found inside fish and whales and dolphins. And, you know, that is in our food chain. So I'll let you have a guess how long you think a plastic bag like this is likely to stay in our environment. Have a little think, floating around in some form or other. Well, it may surprise you that this can actually stay in our environment for between 100 and 300 years. That's what we estimate. So that's a very long time. And a plastic bottle as well. These things that we see floating around a lot, these can stay in our environment, we think, between 450 and 1,000 years. So just trying to cut down on things like that. And we do see, when we do beach cleans, we see a lot of cotton buds, and we think they can stay around for about 150 years. Usually just we see the plastic, the blue plastic bit. And we also say in the book, try not to put wipes down the loo. We say in the book, don't flush wipes down the loo. And often in sewage outflow systems, you find a lot of these cotton buds and wipes that are kind of clogging the sewage systems as well. So that's another thing to bear in mind. So what can we do then to reduce these things that are going to be in our environment? Well, we say reduce, reuse, recycle, the 3 R's. So in recycling, you know, if you're putting this plastic bottle back, as we're saying, this plastic bottle deposit return scheme, if we're recycling these all the time, we're kind of closing that circle. And, you know, so we're still putting the same amount of plastics in, but we're reusing them. So recycling is one thing, and I'm sure most of you do that at home. So it's trying to make sure we're doing that properly. But also it's very important that we're using less plastics, because there's just such a large amount of plastics in our environment. We're trying to encourage people to use less. So things like plastic straws, you know, you use that once and it's thrown away. There are alternatives like metal straws and bamboo straws now that are reusable. So if you're traveling, maybe you can take one of those, or not use a straw at all. Often you'll be in a cafe or you know, a takeaway place, and they will give you a straw just as a matter of course, and you know, you have a choice to kind of say, well, actually I don't need that, thank you. When I go to certain cafes, often they make our sort of famous chain cafes, if you're having a cold drink, often they just make that cold drink in a plastic cup, whether you're sitting in or taking it away. So I will say, you know, if I'm sitting in and I'm having the cold drink, I'll say, can I have that in a mug rather than in a plastic cup? And sometimes they look at me strangely, but just because it's a cold drink, it doesn't have to be made in a plastic cup. So it's kind of making those little changes. I always say, you have a choice and you have a voice. You have a very powerful voice. So it's making these little changes, like when you go to the shops, taking a bag with you. The study was done recently that showed the average household had 52 bags for life. So I don't think that was the intention when Bags for Life were created, to have one for every week of the year. But so we were replacing these with then another form of plastic, the Bag for Life. And, I tend to just take a bag like this with me whenever I go shopping. And I'll take a water bottle wherever I go. On a day out, I take a reusable water bottle. My little boy Bo has one of these as well. Not just to go to school with, he has it all the time at weekends. And when we travel, we always have our bottles, and I always have a hot cup for hot drinks. I'm kind of known for always having a hot cup. So whenever we go anywhere, we take those with us, and we're not caught out, and then we don't have to use these single-use plastics. So, and as I said, you do have a powerful voice. So what we really need, the most important thing, is less plastics at source. So less plastics, single-use plastics being produced, less plastics going into this funnel at the top, and so there'll be less plastics coming out the bottom, is really what we need. So if we're all making these little changes and we're all getting our voice heard, hopefully we can encourage this change at the top level from the producers of plastics and the supermarkets, for example. So it's trying to encourage, we really need this change, that supermarkets are finding alternatives, and so that we can shop and it not be too expensive, but it's not all coming in plastics. Surfers Against Sewage also have a campaign. One of their campaigns called Return to Offender. You could look that up on the Surfers Against Sewage website. If you Google them, the Return to Offender is, say if you're doing a beach clean, which is another thing you can do, a beach clean or a park clean, or wherever you live, a little clean. But just be careful, if you haven't got a grabber, make sure you're wearing gloves, don't just be picking up litter. But if you're doing a little clean like that, if you find, say, a lot of a certain brand of plastics from a certain brand of drink, for example, you can then return these to the offender, we say, so the producer of that product, to say, I'm finding a lot of these in our environment. Is there any way that you can find an alternative? So we often do beach cleans. When we surf, there's another charity called 2 Minute Beach Clean that you might find interesting, run by an amazing guy called Martin Dorey, who's very passionate about this as well. And so he encourages people to just do a quick beach clean. If we all do that, or your park or your street or wherever you are, take 2 minutes to try and help to improve your environment. So when we come out the surf, because it's so cold where we are, we tend to be wearing gloves, and then we'll pick up the litter or plastics that we see and try to make a bit of a difference. I think since lockdown, a lot of us have seen these, there's been quite a lot of images of littering, a lot of litter being left behind since people have emerged. And so I think if we can all try to respect our environment, each one of us, then that's going to make a difference. And the whole horrible coronavirus situation has shown us what we can all do if we work together for the greater good. And I think if we can try apply that, throughout our life, working together for the greater good, that also applies to these environmental issues. Because I think it is pretty cool to care. This is our planet, and it's your planet, and it's your future as well. So, you can really make a difference. We've written letters to our MPs, and I took my little boy Bo to an all-party parliamentary group with me at the Houses of Parliament, when he was 5, and he made posters and he spoke to the MPs, and they did listen, because they find it harder to ignore younger voices. I think Greta has shown us that. So I'd love to hear any of the environmental things that you're doing, any of your projects, and working in collaboration, with your other guides is an amazing thing to do. And, that gives you all the more power, I think. So thanks so much for joining me today. If you want to find out more about my children's book, you can go to littleturtleturnsatide.com. This book, actually, which was very important to us, was created using bio inks and solar power and FSC certified paper. So that kind of shows that it's sustainably sourced. And that is another thing, like throughout the projects I do, I want them to be authentic, so I'm not writing a book about ocean plastics that then comes wrapped in plastic and isn't sustainably sourced. So it's important that I think about these things as I go through, and that's another thing you can think about in any projects you're doing. And you can also find me on social media. We have at Little Turtle Turns the Tide on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm Lauren_Davies on Instagram if you want to find me there, and we're also on Twitter. And have a great virtual festival, and I'm sure you're going to do amazing things in the world and for the world. Okay, have a great day. Bye.